Hey guys, we just finished up our week up at Manitoulin. It's our last day here. So we were kind of expecting to be stuck to the inland lakes based on the forecast for the week. So we did a little bit of research, and on day one we went to hit a place called Cook's Dock. Last year we went there one day. We pulled in a couple of pike in the deep weeds, and we were really hoping that that was going to be our main spot to hit. And so we traveled down there day one, 2 kayaks in the boat ready to cast, and we showed up, and to our surprise there were no weeds at all. We looked all over the place. Everything that was there last year had disappeared from the winter and hasn't grown in yet. We're up quite a bit earlier than last time, so we weren't expecting the weeds to not be there. We were expecting them to be a little bit shallower. However, it did not play in our favor. We had basically sand bottom, which the pike do not like to sit in this time of year. So we fished that for a whole day, and we had no fish to be seen, no follow-ups, nothing. We found another boat, a couple of anglers, and they also said they had no luck based on the conditions that they were fishing in. So we had to resort to brand new water. So what we did was day two, we took off to Lake Woolsey. It's a new place for us. We've fished it once before for bass. However, we're not in bass season right now, so we had to focus on our pike fishing, which we do have a lot of knowledge in pike fishing, however not in this clear water. So we had to it took a little bit to get used to it. So day one, we looked all over the place for weeds. We found a few, and the conditions were very sunny and very calm, so the fish could really see our baits, which isn't always great for predator fishing. So we had a lot of follow-ups. We could see a lot of fish following our baits to the boat, just not hitting. We weren't casting far enough for them to decide they want to eat it. So we had to eventually start trolling. That helps us cover a lot more ground, and it helps us leave the baits in the strike zone for a lot longer. So we took advantage of that. We trolled around for about half an hour at the very end of our trip out there, and Hannah actually pulled in a nice pike, her first pike ever, trolling. I believe she was trolling with a crankbait. She had a square bill. We had 10 feet of water, 5 feet of weeds, and our square bill was sitting at about 4 feet of water, so it was just about a foot over those weeds, and that's the strike zone. You got to pull the fish up from the deep water. And so that's what happened on day two. But we knew going into day three that there's more fish to be caught there. We saw a lot of action, not the best conditions, but yeah, we knew there was fish around, so we decided to hit it again for day three. So day three, the conditions were a little bit different. We had rough water, not terrible, but enough chop to break up those baits on the surface. So I went out with Johnny here with me, and we went out and we decided to cast, and all we did all day was cast. We knew the one spot that we had the fish on last time, that there's going to be pike around that area, so we went and we fished it. But the wind was blowing us in the wrong direction, and with just 2 people on the boat trying to handle the trolling motor and casting with that wind, it was just a pain. So we decided to venture off into new water. We went under the bridge that separates Lake Woolsey from Lake Huron, and we went up into some really shallow water, and we ended up pulling smallmouth. We pulled a nice sized smallmouth off of its bed, which up here we try not to do. They're not in season right now. We cast out a big pike lure, and it's just protecting its nest in shallow water. So we ended up pulling on one smallmouth, which was kind of neat to see, but at the same time we didn't want to keep doing that. We didn't want to mess up their what don't we want to mess up? Yeah, I guess they're breeding. We didn't want to keep on pulling them off their beds, since we want to be able to catch them later on in the year and for many years to come. So we decided to pick up, and we went back to where we ended up getting the fish before. Hannah's fish the day prior, and we started casting, and it started working out a little better for us in the afternoon. The wind calmed down, but the chop was still on the lake, and we found some weird looking weeds that were a little bit closer to the top of the water, and so we started throwing spinner baits above them, and I ended up catching a nice 32-inch pike, which was unexpected because we weren't expecting to get very large fish. We were expecting to get numbers, especially in the clear water. So it was very neat to see. However, we only got to cast in that weed bed there for about 20 minutes, and we ended up pulling in a nice fish, and then the day was over for us. We had to call our quits and head back to camp. So we once again knew that we had to fish that spot hard because we were pulling fish that we didn't know were there, and we needed to get answers. Where are the big fish? Where are the numbers of fish? And what's going to be the strongest weed bed for us in that area? So we knew we had to stick shallow. We had to stick to the weeds since that's what pike like to venture off into. So we had to kind of find the number one way of getting them. So we went back to what was working because if you have something that's working, you never want to give it up. You want to fish it until it's done, and you decide that it's not going to work for you anymore. But if something works and if something's not broke, don't fix it. So what we did day 4, we went back in the morning. Left the cameraman behind, which was too bad. Went out with Hannah, and the two of us started casting, and we said, let's go try the bay across from where we were catching all the fish. So again, new water, very similar to where we just were, very close, but it's something new for us. We found it's actually on the north side of the bay, and that it was very protected from wind, so the weeds were able to grow a little bit stronger in that area. So when we went over there and I started running the sonar, we found there was thick weeds. Can't get a bait through below the canopy of the weeds. You can't get a bait through that, which is it stinks because you can't fish that area in the weeds. However, you can pull a lot of big fish in that area because that's where they're hiding. So we decided to cast around there, and Hannah pulled in 2 more pike casting. So that puts her at 3 pike total, and I believe one of them was about 18 inches and the other was in the late 20s. So good pike. But we had, once again, just crazy amounts of follows. It was, you see the pike in this clear water, you can see the pike for 15 feet off the side of the boat, and they'll follow the lure all the way up to the boat, and as soon as you're about to figure 8 for them, they just spook from the boat. They turn around and they start running. They don't stick around. So it's a little bit different from what we're used to in a sense that the fish here have seen lures. When we go up north and we fish for pike, the fish have not seen lures. As soon as something shiny runs in front of them, they just eat it. Yeah. That's what they do. They just take a bite of it. Around here, they're a little more cautious because more of the fish have been caught. They've seen more of the bait.
They're more conditioned. Yeah.
They're more conditioned, yeah. So we had to play it a little bit slower. So we went back in the afternoon, was it? Yeah, we went back that afternoon. Myself, Evan, and Johnny, and we had 1 white spinnerbait, and it's a pretty big spinnerbait. It's what we throw for pike, and sadly I only brought 1 of them. Never make that mistake again. But we were casting, and selfish me, I had that bait on my rod, and I ended up pulling in 2 fish, I think it was, that night. I ended up pulling in 2. Nothing of size, smaller guys. I got once again another smallmouth casting in a different bay this time, and then I ended up getting another pike. So we had to find what was working, and we figured spinnerbaits was the way to go. You can really they're very versatile baits. Anyone can fish them. You can fish them at any speeds. You can change the rod bend. You can run them at different depths, and they're weedless. So it's just all around a great bait. Pike can't resist. As soon as they see a spinnerbait run over their weed bed, they have to come up and check it out. And just this trip, white was working for us. That's all we found up until that day. So we just kept throwing that bait, and it kept on producing for us. So coming up on day 4, we had the location pinned. We had our lures pinned. We were trying to stick to spinnerbaits. And we were just trying to basically get everyone a fish on board. So we were trying to share the 1 white spinnerbait, and so I gave that one to Johnny, and he started casting that for the day. I took a Fire Tiger, a little bit smaller than the white spinnerbait, and I started throwing that, and Evan was throwing a large collection of baits, as he always does. He loves fishing different baits. Yeah, top waters, monster, line through trout, just whatever you can. He likes changing it up. He likes fancy lures, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what produces the funnest, sometimes the biggest bites. So yeah, we decided that we'd start throwing those spinner baits, and surprisingly, in those conditions, it hadn't worked in prior days. But that's the only spinner bait I had, the Fire Tiger. That's a little bit smaller. It had a willow blade that didn't produce much of a thumping action compared to the big white spinner bait, and it was drawing a lot of fish. I had my polarized glasses on, and I could see I had probably 6 or 7 follow-ups, a couple of the fish pushing the 40-inch range. And talking to Jonathan, he had no follow-ups all day with the white spinner bait. So we decided to change it up, and just basically we unclipped our lures, switched them, and let Johnny give a few casts with the Fire Tiger. And I'm not sure how he was working it, but I wish he'd share that, because he was stumped all trip. He had a few follow-ups, no bites, nothing was going for him. It was kind of a tough trip up until this day, and he throws out the Fire Tiger.
5 casts in, bro?
Yeah, I'd say the 5th cast he casts out, and he just gets a monster hit. It comes out from the weeds right next to the boat. In these clear waters, he watched it happen. All 3 of us did, and this fish just came up, and he grabbed it sideways and just started peeling drag. We had Johnny set up with a pretty fast action rod. I think it's a medium weight and 15-pound braid on it with a leader, and that's not a lot of power to pull in a big fish like he had on. So I was starting to get a little bit worried, because these fish, what we find happens is they'll bite the bait and they'll swim into the thickest of thick weeds, and you have to try and snap your rod out of that, get the fish up above the weeds, or else they're going to get tangled, you're going to get slack, and the fish is going to spit it. So he worked it perfectly. He got the fish right up on top of those weeds and just fought it for about 5 minutes, and it was doing circles around the boat. And instantly, as soon as it hit, we all knew it was a good fish, but we had no clue how good of a fish. So our first fish, being over 40 inches on Manitoulin Island, was brought into the boat. So we ended up taking line, and we put it across the fish, as I don't have a tape measure on board with me. I need to get one, but we're all pretty anxious to see how big that fish was. So we fished for another hour, and we decided to head back to camp. I don't think we got any more fish that day, but a lot of action once again. And we got back to camp, put it on the scale, and we came up with 40.5 inches. So that's an awesome fish. Congrats to Johnny for pulling in that monster. And yeah, he kind of set the bar for us, what we have to beat next time we're up. So that is the big fish of the trip. Johnny pulled in that 40.5 incher, crazy girth on it, so it just worked out. That's what you want. Someone catching a fish
Luckily,
of a lifetime.
We had a leader on it too.
Yeah,
before
leaders before. Yeah, before we came down, and we weren't throwing leaders because we were expecting salmon, and we weren't expecting to hit the pike that hard, so we didn't have any leaders with us. But luckily, we made a trip into town the day before and got a steel leader, which was, yeah, it was a blessing. Yeah, it was a blessing. So it just worked out. We got a perfect hook set on the fish, fought it perfectly up above the weeds, got it in the net, and we got that fish back in the water safe and sound. She swam off with lots of energy. So that's yeah, it worked out well. So yeah, it's our 5th day, last day of fishing, and the weather just took a turn for the worst. Pike, typically, as with all fish, I find, I like fishing consistent weather. If we have 4 days of rain, the 4th day is always the best for me. If we have 4 days of sunshine, the 4th day is always the best. The more consistent the weather, I just find it to be the best fishing, the strongest fishing. Since as soon as the temperature changes, the water quality starts to drop. Yeah, those fish just like to hunker down and wait it out until it's kind of consistent, and then they start to move around a little more. But luckily for us, it also brought a lot of cloud cover, so we hit, I think the weather dropped to about mid-60s when we were doing high 70s for all week. And so the last day it drops to mid-60s, but the cloud cover really helps out lures, because the fish don't see the lure coming across the water as easily, and it kind of represents a bait fish more than usual, because they don't see it as clearly. So they don't see the fine details. We started fishing, and it was a tough day with the weather change. We had a few bites. I caught 2 small pike that we didn't even
worry about
pictures. We just kind of caught them, tossed them back in the lake, let them go. They weren't anything to write home about. And then we were fishing in the same spot we were the day before that Johnny got his 40.5 incher, and I knew I had a bar to beat, so casting that Fire Tiger spinnerbait ended up hooking into a good fish. However, I didn't fight it as well as Johnny did. The fish bit and it dove straight to the bottom of the lake, and it took me through some very thick weeds and pulled in this fish with, it was wearing a skirt of seaweed. It was just, so it was a tough battle. She brought me all the way around the boat 2 or 3 times, running around, had me squatting, towing our boat around, and ended up getting the fish in. And we knew it was a good fish. We weren't sure if it was going to be able to compete with the 40.5. However, it was a really fat fish. So we decided to get the tape and get it measured once again with the string, get it back to the camp, and we got it up on the tape, and it did not compete with Johnny's fish at all. It came in at 34 inches, still a great fish, lots of girth, lots of fight, which is awesome. So we put her back, got a few years, and hopefully she'll be back and able to top Johnny's fish. We'll see. So just a few takeaways, a few things we learned on the trip. Basically, number 1 is never be dead set on one thing because it might not work. We came up expecting to fish salmon, not to focus on pike. It didn't work out. We expected to go fish Cook's Dock, and that spot was an absolute bust. And after that, we had to basically work our butts off to try and find those fish. It's not something fun. It's not fun when you try the thing that you're hoping to do and it doesn't work out. So it's always great to have backups. If we did some prior studying of the area, we definitely would have hit those fish faster. Number 2, basically, when you're fishing new water, fish fast baits. That's the way to do it. You want to fish baits that cover a lot of ground very quickly. Trolling is a great option. Crankbaits, spinner baits, anything that's moving, something you don't have to work too much. Find the fish and then fish for them, kind of deal. I think we really found our fish doing. We found them trolling, found them throwing crankbaits, spinner baits, and then we can kind of pick apart the area a little bit better once we know where the general area is. But if we were to sit in one spot jigging for them and the fish aren't there, then we would have never known. So yeah, later on this year, we actually missed muskie opener, so hopefully we'll get a video up shortly. We're going to try and go get a couple of nice muskie out in St. Clair this year, I think, and that should be coming pretty soon. So once we start catching fish, we'll let you guys know. Have a good one.
Stay tuned for more.